Lando Norris has got a new helmet. Sergio Perez is in self-isolation. We've got more races on the Formula One 2020 calendar. What is going on at Ferrari, and how dominant has Mercedes been since 2014? All this and a whole lot more. Welcome to the F1 PitBox. Gary Formato is in the house. Gary, wearing your GTC jacket before we talk Formula One, local motor racing, we had endurance, and I saw something posted about GTC today. What's going on?
Yeah, it looked great. I mean, they had a good event last weekend out of Swartkorps. I think just for us to be able to comply with all the COVID regulations and get one under the belt from an MSA point of view, and all the hard work they've done in terms of their submissions and working with government and making it all happen, were successful. So there will be an event next week, and the GDC Super Cup cars are going to be racing. We're not going to have any GDC cars out there, unfortunately, next weekend, as we sort of kick off slowly with a toe in the water, if you like. But yes, we are racing, and I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to getting a full championship done next season. That's a little bit more tricky for us than it is Formula One or MotoGP or any of those sort of big categories. But we are back, and we getting to grips with things. So happy that things are really starting to get back to normal for us.
Oh, that's fantastic news, Gary. And of course, we'll keep everybody updated on our various channels, and specifically here on the F1 PitBox about GTC as well. You mentioned COVID, Gary. Let me just tell you, Sergio Perez is in self-isolation because of a test that was done, which is
Yes, okay, so we're just waiting for Sasha to get back online. We're having a couple of little problems tonight with our links here. Yeah, and a couple of new races that we are going to have in Formula One this year. Of course, it is Mugello. We're going to go and race in Mugello in Italy this year. Of course, a track that is owned by Ferrari. A lot of testing done at that circuit, and that's going to end of the season for us. Imola, another Italian round. So a good year for Italy when it comes to Formula One. They had a terrible start of the year, with COVID-19. So nice to see some of the Italy getting a couple of extra Grand Prix than they would normally have. And of course, we're off to Portugal as well for the first time in a very long time. The last time we raced in Portugal was at the Estoril circuit in the Algarve. And now we're at Portimao, which I've only seen World Superbikes actually compete on another racing categories. But what an amazing circuit as well. So it's a very, very exciting new circuits joining the Formula One calendar this year. Mugello is one of those circuits where you actually sort of dreamt about seeing Formula One cars going and racing around. And now we're actually going to see it happen later on this year. So fantastic news for Italy and Formula One as well. And I've got to say, I'm also quite happy with a very, very strong European calendar. A lot of classic tracks. And for me, that's really what Formula One is about. So I'm very excited to see those particular circuits on the calendar making a comeback. And who knows, maybe they stay, maybe they won't. But just good to see them nonetheless.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just disappeared for a couple of seconds. But just picking up on it, Gary, Imola, we haven't raced this since 2006. The only driver who will race at Imola who raced in 2006 is Kimi Raikkonen, which is quite extraordinary. And then Mugello as well. I mean, Mugello is also going to be the Grand Prix, Gary, where Ferrari will celebrate their 1,000th Grand Prix, and hopefully they won't be lapped around the Mugello circuit. But for many, many years, when testing was so freely available, I mean, the amount of laps that guys like Michael Schumacher did around Mugello, it's a hairy circuit, Gary, and it's going to be a big test for the drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not a Tilke circuit, that's for sure. Neither is Portimao, neither is Imola. So we've got some really exciting circuits coming back. And Mugello, I mean, if you look at some of the onboard laps from some of those days of testing, it's extremely fast circuits, some fantastic corners on that track. Just not what we actually used to in today's Formula One. So for me. And the people of our age, actually, with these grey hairs coming through, and you talk about Kimi Raikkonen in 2006, and we can remember it like it was yesterday. It's great to see a track like this actually on the Formula One calendar, just from that point of view, because as I said just now, it's one of those circuits where you sort of wished you could see a Grand Prix, and we actually get it. So it's not all bad. We've had some good things come out of all of this, and let's hope it keeps on just getting better and better for all of us.
Yeah, before we talk about the Americas, I just want to, you want to feel a little bit older as well, Gary. Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris did a Q&A. Lando Norris was born in 1999. Carlos Sainz was born in 1994. Neither of them knew who the world champion was in the year of their birth. How scary is that? Unbelievable.
I don't even want to ask you who the world champion was in the year of your birth.
No. We don't want to go there. We don't want to go there. No, we don't want to go there. That was way too long ago. Listen, the unfortunate side of it, and I must agree with you. I love the fact that it's European, maybe purely from a selfish point of view, because we don't have to wake up at crazy hours. But no racing in the Americas, Gary. Canada, United States, Mexico, and Brazil. Which is sad for the calendar because, there's so much popularity over there as well. But I suppose Formula One has to consolidate, and they have to be so careful when it comes to dealing with this COVID-19 pandemic. They've got to ensure that all the protocols are taking place, and they can't really afford to have some blemish on what they're trying to achieve.
No, they absolutely can't. And remember, the logistics involved in traveling to a race in the Americas is far greater, obviously, than anywhere in Europe. You can't just load your truck and off you go and drive to the racetrack. It's a big effort, as we know, as we've seen many times. We know it goes into moving the circus around. It's just, and of course, the numbers speak for themselves. Brazil, America. Unfortunately, at this point in time, it just makes no sense if you look at what what the numbers are, believe them or not. So it's just, unfortunately, I think Texas had the record number of Grand Prix ticket sales in the history of the Circuit of America. So it was really looking good. And Formula One wanted to grow a market in America, and they were doing a great job in actually doing that. It really worked well. For the first time ever, you can say, certainly in the United States, they really got some traction. Formula One is working well there. But it's 1 year, and I'm sure that we'll be back the next year and pick it up and keep going again. Brazil's obviously an obvious one that you don't really want to lose, and of course we also understand why we can't go there. But just the Brazilian Grand Prix is also it is a fantastic Grand Prix and just full of such passionate people and Formula One fans over there. But we've got to take the good with the bad. As I said, we've got some great tracks coming up, and unfortunately we will finding our way through this thing. But things are looking up. There are some exciting things to look forward to.
Yeah, 100%. There has been rumor that Turkey could be included on the calendar, which is weird. But the final one is Spain. Gary, all of a sudden a big surge in coronavirus again in Spain. And there's talk now of perhaps a postponement for the Barcelona Grand Prix. It's so enriched in everything that we do. All of the testing happens in Barcelona. Everybody knows the circuit so well. I got to be quite honest, not my favorite circuit in the world. And if they replace it with a second Monza or Imola track, I wouldn't be too upset.
No, I agree with you on that one. I think the guys, as you said, they probably know the circuit too well. As you said, they spend a lot of time there. It hasn't given us the best of races, and there's been a couple, but generally it hasn't been a very, very good racing weekend in Barcelona. But again, let's see. They've got to reach the 15 round minimum has got to be achieved though, from Formula One in a contractual point of view. So if a circuit is bumped, like we're talking about Barcelona, they'll have to replace it with somewhere. And I think the chances of a double header working somewhere else is probably an obvious go-to point. So, but let's see. Let's hope it's not. But as I said, with this whole pandemic, we've just got to roll with the punches. And I think, listen, you've got to just commend Formula One on actually doing what they've done in terms of putting all these events together and the dates together. I think it's been fantastic, and just how they've run the events, and they've really been an example of how to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, they've done an exceptional job so far, and may it continue. I'm glad you brought up the contractual obligation, Gary, because a lot of people also don't understand, and it's with all of the sports in the world. It's not just Formula One. The TV companies pay a huge amount of money to the various sports organizations in order for them to go and broadcast the sports live. But regardless of whether it's pandemic or not, they are obligated to deliver a certain amount of product to the television stations. And whether it's 15 or 16 or 18 races, Formula One has to do that. Otherwise, they're out of pocket. They've got to pay all the money back to the broadcasters. So we welcome Imola, Mugello, Nürburgring, and Portimao. And here's a picture of all four of those places. I think it's really wonderfully exciting for what we are going to be seeing later on this year. Okay, Gary, let's get a little bit technical. I mean, I get a lot of questions, and I'm sure you do get a lot of questions, a lot of people phoning you and saying, you know, what's happening with Ferrari and their power unit. And then, of course, also the big talking point this year has been the Racing Point car, and, of course, the similarity to the Mercedes of last year, or even of this year. And of course, Renault has protested it. So let's try and answer some of these questions, and start off with Ferrari and the engine. And I've got to say, Gary, it's not just the engine that they've got a problem with. Let's be honest. It seems as though Ferrari tried to sometime last year adopt a philosophy similar, I think, to Red Bull, slightly higher rear end of the car, and they've got their maths sums a little bit wrong, or maybe very, very wrong, coupled with the fact that they don't have any power coming out of that engine. Is just one disaster after another, unfortunately, for the Maranello brigade.
It is, and having a slow engine is a huge problem. I mean, yes, we understand that more time is made up in the chassis and tires and what have you, but when you've got an engine that's not anywhere near where it needs to be, it puts pressure on everything else, because the drivers need to start driving the car, they overdrive the car, maybe start chasing, setups in order to try and find pace. It's just not something that you need to live with. And I think the biggest concern is just how is Ferrari going to be able to remedy at least that problem? Because remember, it's not only them. They've got other teams. They've got customers that they supply as well. They've got Alfa Romeo, they've got Haas. There's a responsibility to those teams to be able to give them a good product. Those guys are paying a lot of money, especially in Haas's case, for an engine. In some sort of partnership that they have with Ferrari, they can't really afford it. A team like Haas needs every opportunity they can to be able to stay on the Formula One grid going forward into the future. So it's really a big problem. And I think the big thing here is the amount of time. And I think you and I spoke about it just now. And you were mentioning to me, I mean, the timing and just how they've gone about and what they haven't applied for in terms of setting themselves up to try and achieve the gains. I don't think Ferrari's done a good job there.
100%. And let's just clarify, because I wrote a blog the other day why you just can't put a new engine into the back of Ferrari. In terms of the regulations, and I'm going to just read it here, the engine will be largely frozen, okay, with only one update permitted to the ERS, which is the electronic relay system, or changes across the unit for reliability reasons approved from the FIA. Now, this puts Ferrari into a huge problem, together with them and their customer teams as well, because the cars that we have this year in 2020 are going to be the cars that we have the same in 2021. Because of the pandemic, everything's changed. We're not going to have the new rules in 2021. They're postponed to 2022. John Elkann has come out, Gary, the big boss at Ferrari and FCA worldwide, the grandson of Gianni Agnelli, and basically has come out and said, listen, this is where we're at. We're restructuring everything, and we're going to have to basically suffer through the pain and look forward, hopefully, to 2022. And that's rather optimistic, because everyone else is also going to be looking to 2022. So the fact that Elkann just comes out and says we'll be winning again in 2022, I think is a little bit of a loose tongue.
Yeah, it's. I think maybe just keep pacifying all the fans out there and Ferrari supporters, saying don't worry, we kind of got this. The reality is they haven't got it, and I think they come off a situation last year. And I know we've spoken about this at length, and it's been mentioned many times. But at the end of the day, what they had in the back of that car last year was not legal. And yes, they did do a deal with the FIA. I think a lot of teams are still unhappy about it. Nobody really is clear as to what went on there. But that car was super fast. It's slower now because they've had to take whatever it was off, and they haven't, in reaction to that, haven't developed in another direction to keep the sort of pace that they had. It's a big problem for Ferrari and all the Ferrari engine cars, as we said. But I don't know. You've got to. It's a long way to go, 2022, and to sort of have this Mercedes-Benz dominance continue like it is. I mean, it's quite something. And in fact, from Vettel's point of view, maybe a 1 or 2 year deal with Aston Martin actually not the worst thing in the world, because it could actually be quite a good deal for him at the end of the day with what's going on with Ferrari.
Yeah, 100%. I was so upset with the way that Ferrari have treated Sebastian Vettel. I'm saying, well, maybe he's been released from all of this because suffering the way that they are now, and for next year as well, by 2022 he might be out with no options. So, maybe Vettel's had a bit of a strike of luck. Now, Formula One, of course, there's always drama. I mean, it's just so wonderful to see. And at the first race of the season, of course, we saw Red Bull Racing protest the DAS system of Mercedes. And they did it prior to the event actually starting, Gary. The stewards have ruled that the DAS system is legal, and that's where it is. So whether Red Bull want to implement their own is up to them. Mercedes have come out, they're going to continue with it. The other one is Racing Point. Now, the likeliness of the Racing Point 2020 car and the Mercedes-Benz car from last season is strikingly similar, Gary. I mean, we've all seen it. We saw it when they went out testing in March and went, oi, hold on a second. And Renault, after the first race of the season, protested the legality of the Racing Point brake ducts. And we've got a picture of the Racing Point brake ducts compared to the Mercedes-Benz brake ducts over there. And I mean, they are so similar. It's quite crazy. But before I get your comments on it, I mean, they're the two cars from the last Grand Prix. I mean, just look at them. They look basically exactly the same. Mm-hmm. So here's, it's very, very complex, but we're going to try and unravel it a little bit here this evening on the F1 PitBox. Otmar Safnauer has come out. We're going to put it up on the screen so you can actually read it as well, and I'm going to read it to you. There was a big, now listen to this carefully, Gary, because there's some very interesting words that are used here. There was a very big risk that we were going to take a step backwards. And as a matter of fact, when we started developing this, the 2020 car in the tunnel with ideas that we saw through pictures, we took a huge step backwards. I mean, huge seconds elapsed slower at the beginning. It was our own learning that we did through the developed a process of CFD, which is computational fluid dynamics, and tunnel work, and then more designs and redesigns that got us to the place we did. Racing Point is also stated, the CEO, though, is confident that complaints will fail, revealing the FIA has already agreed the entire car is legal and that the stewards are simply going through the process. But just in case, I don't think it'll go against it, but if it does, we will appeal. Our brake ducts are legal. We didn't contravene any sporting and technical regulations on the brake ducts or any other car part for that matter. So the question is, what are Renault protesting about? Gary, to develop a car just by taking photographs is a remarkable effort. And I'm not entirely convinced by this. I'm not saying that there's too much shared information. We must understand that a customer car or customer team like Racing Point, and they are supplied by Mercedes, have the ability to buy certain parts from Mercedes, including the gearbox, and that most probably helps with the suspension. The engine is there as well. And in 2019, they were entitled to get the brake ducts. But those aren't 2019 brake ducts.
You know what? This is a difficult one because I think I agree with you. To design something like that, which has a lot of internal workings as well from a picture, you find it hard to believe. And yes, they would have done their own homework, but so it basically says to you, well, as long as I've got a very, very high-level CFD program and I've got pictures in my hand, I can go and design a Formula One car. That's kind of what he's saying. It sounds a little bit too simple. It sort of takes you back to those years when Sauber arrived at that Ferrari, that 1 year when they arrived. I can't remember what year it was, but when they arrived at Ferrari. So listen, if they've managed to find their way through it and there's been loopholes and they've got themselves up the grid to a point where they're looking actually pretty competitive and quite exciting actually, well then you know what, then good job. And however they've got there, they've got there. And if they've managed to do it within the rule, whether they've bent the rule to the absolute point of just before it shatters, well then they've done a great job in doing that. So you obviously Renault want to make sure that they haven't broken the law outright, and you've got to believe that they've pushed the rule to the absolute breaking point. And and they're getting away with it so far. And I hope that they do, to be totally honest with you, because it's taken a team that was really slipping down the field. No, really, they were falling down the field. They've got the car going. It's actually exciting to see Stroll and Perez up there. People like Vettel talking to them about driving for them. It's changed that entire team and given that team a new lease on life. So, this whole customer car situation in Formula One, I think it's a little more difficult for us to understand because we're not in that space. But, at the end of the day, the more competitive cars you've got up there in the race and racing for the front, it's not a bad thing. But then, of course, if you're Renault and spending absolute bombs and you're not doing a good job, you are going to protest and say, but listen, it's what's going on there. But at the end of the day, Renault wouldn't be beating them anyway. So, it's just one of those things. You can't answer. There's no answer. Well, this is what they've done or that's what they've done. They only know, and they're making it work for themselves within the letter of the law, as close to the edge as it is.
Yeah, there's a couple of things I agree with you, a couple of things I don't agree with you. I agree with the fact that we want to see more competitive teams up there and fighting along, and I don't care if it's Haas versus Williams fighting for the front, as long as we have some kind of competition. And copying in Formula One or any kind of motorsport is not something that all of a sudden is new. We're not going to go into some of the big stories that have happened over the years. The only thing that I have to say about where I'm just a little bit concerned is Formula One's uniqueness is the fact that every car is different. It is bespoke in its own way, and that's what makes it Formula One. Everyone has got the same set of rules, and from there they go and design their car around those set of rules. They don't have the same chassis, they don't have the same wings, they don't have the same everything. They are entitled to go there and develop as much as they can. So I don't ever want to see Formula One where every car looks the same, because I think that would, I just somewhere along the line, I'm not ready for that, and I hope the rest of the Formula One isn't ready for it as well. It's essential to the DNA of Formula One that we do not have too much copying of other cars, because everyone. I take my hat off to Racing Point, Gary, for sitting and saying, you know what, if you can't beat them, join them, and basically sat and said, Mercedes is the best, let's go and do that. And maybe the other teams are just too arrogant or too slow to think about it. But imagine if all 20 cars in the grid, Gary, all of a sudden look like a Mercedes.
No, look, I hear where you're coming from with that, and for sure. But if you take a team like, say, AlphaTauri now, that it's called this year, I believe that maybe they should be allowed a little more sort of allow the teams to work together a little bit more in order to get all the cars up to its ability. So if you're a team, if you've formed an alliance, or you've got a budget to run a second team or whatever it may be, and you've got that information, I think then you should be able to use that information. It also helps keep a second team in the running for a lot less cost, and also just help them onto the right path. And if you aligned yourself with a team that's not doing too well, like a Ferrari Haas situation, then you've got a bit of a problem, because you're not going to go anywhere. But for sure, you don't want to have all the cars looking the same. I get it, but I think you've got Toro Rosso doing it, or Red Bull doing it. Sorry, Mercedes-Benz. I mean, I would hate to say it, but at the end of the day, I don't believe you can design a car from photographs, even with all your CFD. There has to be more information given to you. So that's the reality. If you really want to, nail it on the head, there must have been an exchange of information. There's no two ways about it. Just how they did it and what they transferred, that's the big question, and probably Renault's, and that's Renault's argument.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the Racing Point say they have 886 photographs of the brake ducts. Wow. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Last point in this, because we're going to get to Ferrari and then Mercedes domination. But Andreas Seidel from McLaren has come out, and he's got a comment as well. And he says he wants the F1 regulations tightened to prevent more copying. And you've got to agree with that. You don't want it too loose in terms of the regulations where everybody can just swap materials. But I must agree, Gary. For example, Red Bull own two teams. They should be allowed to share much more information. Yes, the one has got a smaller budget. I mean, that's just natural. So it's not going to be as quick, but they should be allowed to. If Ferrari decide to sit there and say that Alfa Romeo is now their second team and make it public, they should be able to supply more. The same if Mercedes sit there and say, well, it's Racing Point, or it's going to be McLaren, or it's going to be Williams. I agree with that 100%, because I think that on its own will get us to a lot closer racing. And also now going with the budget caps from 2022, hopefully we're going to see 12, 14 cars, right up close to each other and fighting for serious positions.
Yeah, listen, let's hope so. But I think, I'll go out and say, just from my point of view, if you've got an alliance now with another team and you've got this budget cap, it allows you to run almost two programs in tandem. It's like, we're going to try this on this team, we're going to try that on that team. We don't have all the money in the world to spend anymore. So let's rather shortcut everything. It allows you to develop far quicker if you've got two teams to work with, and that's where these alliances and second teams, I think, could really come to the fore. So although we're talking about a budget cap and keeping things, it's cost saving, this could actually be one of the ways the guys are going to find their way around some of that cost saving that's going to be introduced into Formula One next year. So I think it's going to be pretty important. I think it's just part of the makeup of the situation right now. As I said, I think it's okay. I think, as you also said, the more cars you get up there racing and competitive, the better. And not everybody's got Mercedes-Benz's budget. Not everybody's got Ferrari's budgets. Although it's going to be a lot less next year. There's a lot of experience and a lot of IP and people working there. There's a lot of information to share. So let's see. Maybe this is it's a new era of Formula One coming up. And maybe it's like going back to the simulation days. When simulators made an entry into Formula One. You had to have the best simulator. A lot of work was put into simulators, as we know today. We know how it works today. Maybe this is it works like that in NASCAR, which is a lot more restricted in terms of development, as we know. But the bigger teams with 4 or 5 cars or whatever it is have an advantage because they can share that development across all of those different teams or platforms.
Yeah, I think we're in for some very, very fascinating times coming up in the near future. Now, one of the most exciting things about a Formula One race or the build-up when you're watching it on the TV is all of a sudden when that 5-minute board and the music comes along of Formula One. So we have a Ferrari Formula One fan expressing her utter delight when that music starts. Here we go. Oh, it's race weekend, but not great times for Ferrari fans. Gary, as mentioned, there are regulations in terms of where Ferrari maybe have missed a trick when it comes to the engine development, and they've got 30-odd races until the start of 2022. But John Elkann has come out. He says he's got full belief in Mattia Binotto. Binotto now is going to, has made some restructuring changes, which we'll go through in a couple of seconds from now. Your take on where Ferrari are as a management organization of the Formula One team? Do you think this is the right process that they're going through?
Sasha, I think I can't answer if it's the right process, but yes, I think they understand, and everybody understands there needs to be change, but just you don't want to go and just go absolutely berserk. But these things, the results today are a history of what's been happening for the last year. And quite clearly, it just hasn't worked out. So yes, they need to change stuff and get it going better. And these also show, I think, a lot of people that and shareholders, fans, whatever you may be, that there is effort into trying to remedy this problem. How successful they're going to be, let's see. Again, maybe I'm just speaking because we watched an era where it just worked so well, and you've got certain teams like Mercedes-Benz today that are working so well. But that's years and years of putting the right people in the right places, and also putting succession programs and plans in place. Certain people have left the organisation or don't perhaps maybe travel to races, but you've got the new personnel in there. It's taken years and years to develop, which Ferrari had with Ross Brawn and that whole team back in the day. And we all know how long it took Michael Schumacher to win the World Championship in getting the team. So I think the team we can't expect any sort of magic or overnight turnaround at all, no matter what the structures are at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, just an interesting stat as well. They've had 4 different team principals in 6 years. I mean, you know, an English Premier League football side, if they have that kind of turnaround, you just know that they're going to be relegated. So, you know, John Elkann is putting his faith into Matteo Binotto, and John Elkann is a young man. You know, he's got massive shoes to fill from his grandfather. There he is on the right, Gianni Agnelli. He's in charge of the whole Fiat organization that just merged with Peugeot Citroën as well. So there's a lot on his plate. And of course, he's in charge of Ferrari as well. He says it's a long haul of rebuilding to become competitive again. So, Gary, in terms of I'm just going to mention the names because I don't have all of the pictures, but there's one name that will make us smile a little bit. There's a new performance development department that's headed up by Enrico Cardile. Other main areas remain unchanged. Enrico Galtieri in charge of the power unit. Laurent Mecchi is a sporting director and in charge of trackside activities. Simona Resta will continue to lead the chassis engineering department. And then Rory Byrne is, a lot of people sit there and say, oh, well, where's Rory Byrne gone? He's always been at Ferrari. He's been there on a consultancy basis. There he is, the legendary designer, and I suppose we're just extra proud because he is a South African. He's going to be very much exclusively concentrating on the 2022 car. And yes, he might be getting on in a few years, Gary, but his knowledge, his understanding, I mean, he's from Tolman to Benetton to Ferrari, you name it. I mean, he's done it all. It might be vital for Ferrari to use his expertise.
Listen, when you've got somebody like that sitting, you know, in the town in Maranello, of course it makes sense to sort of draw on that expertise. It's good to see this involved, and probably I think maybe just it's becoming a little more public. But as you said, I think always being involved in whichever project as it may have been at Ferrari, some of the road car stuff as well. So yeah, it's good to know that he's still there, and you know, let's hope that he can work some of that magic that we've known him for in the past. But the team's got to be good. I mean, it's got to be everybody. It can't. It's not, you know, not just one person. It's going to make the difference here. And you know, I think let's just hope that they can get it together. Look, it's critical for Ferrari to get the Formula One program on track because it's a massively important part of that whole organization. You know, it's a little different. Even with Mercedes-Benz, for example, you know, the Formula One program it's important. It's huge. It's working well. It's great. But Ferrari's Ferrari. You know, a lot of that brand and heritage revolves around this Formula One program. So it's vitally important that they get it back and back on track and get that car competitive. It just has to happen like that.
No, very much so, and sure, yeah, it's going to be a long, painful battle for Ferrari fans, but you know, the Ferrari fans been through this before as well. Just got a message to you, Gary, on our WhatsApp group. Breaking news: Sergio Perez has an inclusive COVID test, and he's put himself into self-isolation. TG, if you're watching the show, my friend, you would have heard us talk about that right at the top of the show. Yes, it is an inconclusive COVID test at the moment, so we'll just have to wait and see. I can't for the life of me, Gary, think who the third or reserve driver for Racing Point is. Is it Vettel?
Good. That's a good one. You never know. You never know. You never know. Listen, for sure, you score more points this year driving a Racing Point. There's no two ways about that. But that's a good point. I don't know who the reserve is at this point in time. Gee whiz. But yeah, all these inconclusive COVID tests are a bit concerning anyway.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, let's talk about the dominance of Mercedes. They are just a team on another stratosphere. I mean, they're in a time warp. That's how good they are at present. So, I mean, if you just look at this little graphic that we've got there, there's Usain Bolt in first in Racing Point with Usain Bolt, and then the rest all trying to play a little bit of catch up as well. Now, let's have a look at their wins so far. And we're just going to stay on this picture, Gary. This is from 2010 to 2019. So in the space of 10 years, Lewis Hamilton's won 73 times. In the domination of Vettel, he won 48 times, and that basically sort of, you take 2010 to 2013, that's when Vettel won basically just about everything. From there, Lewis Hamilton has won 73 times. Bottas is only sitting on 7. Well, he's got eight now at the moment. So at the moment, Mercedes versus the rest looks a little bit like this, and that is Mercedes basically up against some go-karts. You know what I mean? That's the rest. That's the rest of the field. That's 2020 in one picture. And Gary, it's one of those. Love it or hate it. It is what it is, and you can only compliment and commend Mercedes for what they have done since this hybrid era. Take away all of the, well, these regulations changed and those regulations changed or whatever. Plus, on top of it, they do have what will be the most successful in terms of Grand Prix victories, racing driver Lewis Hamilton. It's another one of those records he will break. So, I mean, his experience is invaluable as well.
Oh, sure. Listen, I mean, Hamilton's been very, I think, he made the right decisions in his career. Moved to Mercedes just at the right time as well. And it's worked out fantastically well for him. Even a driver of his caliber, you need the right team and the right car underneath you to be able to do what he's doing. And he's just taken it and maximized the opportunity. And then that's why we see the numbers that we do. But yes, they have absolutely owned this hybrid era. There's no two ways about it. And right now, there's not much chance of anybody actually catching them unless Ferrari or somebody do what they did last year and find some kind of massive development that's going to help them compete. And as you see, we're going right up into, we're going through next year with the same sort of situation, I think, at hand. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even think we've seen Mercedes-Benz push to the limit. I think they've still got a lot in hand. And if they need it, it's just a matter of Hamilton driving the car faster. That's what I believe. There's nowhere near that they've pushed to the limit as yet. They've been fantastic. And Toto Wolff's done a great job. Got to remember Niki Lauda also being involved there. It really was a great time for this team. And I know there was a lot of talk, and there is talk about Mercedes maybe not committing, but you've got such a great thing going. To chuck it all in now would be crazy. They've just got to keep going, because these things don't last forever. It may seem like a long time for us, and it has been a long time since they've been so dominant, but there will come a day when it stops. And while you're riding this wave now with so much success, you just got to keep on going with it, because it's really a phenomenal situation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so organized. The management in place. They all know each other. It's a fantastic time. But there are some people who aren't very happy, Gary, with the dominance of Mercedes. And amazingly, by eating spaghetti, they can actually make their own Formula One sounds when they're watching Mercedes. Check this out. Just a little bit of fun. Okay, let's look at some of the numbers, Gary. I want to go through some of the numbers of Mercedes' domination. Of the 117 races since the beginning of the turbo hybrid era in 2014, Mercedes has won 86 races, making it a win average of 73.5%. They've taken a staggering 92 pole positions so far out of 117 races. That's a percentage of 78.6%. In 2016, things went a little bit more crazy when they took 20 out of the 21 pole positions. In terms of podiums, they have taken a total of 174 podiums from a possible of 234. The numbers speak for themselves. Since 2014, 6 years have passed, and Mercedes has taken all 6 Constructors and Drivers' Championships. In 2014, they broke McLaren's record from the 1998 season by taking 11 1-2 finishes. In 2015, they broke it again by taking 12 1-2 finishes. And since 2014 up to the 2019 Japanese Grand Prix, Mercedes has taken 47 1-2 finishes. It's just mad. Furthermore, by taking 16 victories in 2014 and 2015, they broke another record, and that was the record jointly held by McLaren and Ferrari. Not only this, they broke the same record further again by taking 19 victories in 2016. And I can tell you, it's not going to end until at least the end of 2021. The numbers are mind-boggling. And you have to ask the question, is this detracting from people getting frustrated, wanting the FIA perhaps to jump in and change some of the rulings to try and make things a little more competitive?
Yeah, that's always such a tough question because, as soon as you have that, almost like, I mean, it's to cut somebody's wings because they've developed themselves to the position where Mercedes-Benz is difficult, and it's Formula One. If it's GT3 racing, when you've got balanced performance is part of the deal, or any other kind of racing where it happens, it's acceptable to make it happen for the show, so to speak. But I think the thing with Formula One is you've got to just keep on doing what Formula One are doing. They've got to open up Formula One more in terms of the back end, allow more access to the fans, to things we haven't seen and been part of in terms of the technical regulations, in terms of drivers, all that sort of stuff. And you've got to sort of delve into that and let people understand just as to why this is all happening with Mercedes-Benz and just what sort of effort and just how good this job that they are doing is. And I think that's really what you've got to do. So for me to say, well, of course, I'd love to see racing to the front. And we spoke about Racing Point just now. Yes, of course, you want to see the good racing, but you also can't now just take it away from them. And I've got to be honest with you, and maybe I sound like a diehard Schumi fan here, but at the end of the day, there was a lot of that happening in the Schumacher era, where points would change, qualifying rules would change, those sort of things, to try and stop that Ferrari dominance. And to be honest with you, I didn't agree with it then, and I wouldn't agree with it now if they did the same thing to Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very valid point. And it's not a question of crying over spilt milk. I mean, they changed the rules when Schumacher was dominating. But you're right, it wasn't right then, and it shouldn't be right now. And I think it also comes down to Racing Point and Renault. I just want to go back to that point. FIA made a deal with Ferrari. Nobody's happy about it. Are they going to make a deal with Racing Point and Renault and sit there and say, listen, boys, let's just cut everything out here and start fresh? We've got some interesting, I think the next 48 hours, hopefully we get some clarification on that point as well.
Yeah. Look, I think from a transparency point of view, I do. You can understand the other team's frustrations. At least you want to understand what went on.
Correct.
To have had it covered up, it doesn't leave a good taste in anybody's mouth, and also I don't agree with that either. But for whatever reason, it's happened like that, and it is what it is. But if you were Christian Horner or anybody else running a team there, you'd also be asking the questions.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so let's get on to this weekend. It is a double header at Silverstone. It's race week, and we haven't seen the cat for a while. It's Raw Keek. It's going to be a lot of fun. Gary, one of the things that Michael Massey, the race director, has really cautioned the drivers on are track limits, and it's no different here in Silverstone as well. I think it's Abbey and Stowe, turns 9 and turn 15. They're going to be heavily penalised if they sort of exceed the track limits. In Formula One, I suppose it's a little bit different to tin top racing or GT racing, but I think it is important that these rules are enforced when it comes to F1, so that we don't have any crazy shenanigans going on.
Yes, it does, and it's like any law. If that's the law and that's the track limit, people will go to the limit, and if they can get away with it, they'll go further and further, and the track will end up becoming a piece of the concrete that's right next to the gravel trap or the wall, and that's where it'll go. So you have to have the limits. Listen, there's a lot of people that argue and say, if you had normal circuits with grass on the edge of the curb, you wouldn't have to monitor the track limits. But I think yes, it is definitely a safer situation to have than them, and the drivers need to just adhere to the limits. I think if everybody works with it, it's a safer option, and it's certainly the way to go. Than chucking cars off into kitty litter and into walls and what have you, and damaging cars and not having cars finishing races and what have you. So I think it's okay. They've got to just stick to the limits. I mean, that's just how it is.
Yeah, it's part of racing as well. Now, Gary, the last time we had our show, we were talking about Alex Albon for the Red Bull team, and I was sitting and saying, Christian Horner wasn't as complimentary about Danny Kvyat and Pierre Gasly as he has been about Alex Albon. And it sounds like I'm a broken record and having a go at Alexander Albon. I'm not at all. I'm just having a go at just the way of the thinking of Red Bull. Alex Albon again at the previous Grand Prix. Yes, he finished in fourth position, which was a great result and was great points for the team. But his performance was not that exceptional. Now all of a sudden, Red Bull have said, well, in order to improve Alex Albon, we're now going to bring in Simon Rennie, who was the engineer for Danny Ricciardo for many years, worked with Vettel, worked with Alonso as well. They never offered these opportunities, Gary, to Pierre Gasly or to Danny Kvyat. Now, am I sounding like a really moaning child, or I just don't, I'm not entirely, I'm losing a lot of respect for Christian Horner, the way that he's dealing with these situations.
I think that maybe it goes a little bit more than just Albon. If you looked at the cars in Hungary, and I'm glad you mentioned Red Bull, because we're talking about, while we're talking about Racing Point improving in leaps and bounds, and for whatever reason it is, that they've improved. Red Bull in Hungary just looked terrible. That car in qualifying on Saturday afternoon was nowhere. Max Verstappen lost the car on numerous occasions. You could hear how frustrated Albon was. On Saturday as well. The car's not working. Things are not working there. So I don't think it's only Albon. I think Max is certainly able to carry the car a lot further than Albon is right now. And I think that's where they want to try and work with him and get him to be able to at least do that. But they don't have a good car right now, which is quite amazing for Red Bull, because Red Bull, from a chassis and handling point of view, was normally, just top of the pops. It was the engine situation that was perhaps not on par. But right now, that doesn't look like a very, very healthy car.
Yeah, it's actually quite amazing when you look at the Red Bull car and you look at the Ferrari car and take the Ferrari engine out of the equation. All of a sudden, I mean, from Ferrari, yes, they might have had power last year, but the car was very good as well. Yes, it struggled in some of the low-speed corners, but for the rest of the car was actually very, very good. And this year, it's not often that Adrian Newey gets things wrong, but they are also scratching their heads, maybe just trying to catch up to and understand what Mercedes have over them.
Well, this is the sort of pressure that Mercedes-Benz is putting on everybody else. I think you're 100% right. Everybody else is trying to find a way forward, and sometimes the direction they take is not going to work. They've got to come back. But I think the one thing you mentioned, Adrian Newey. I mean, if you've got Adrian Newey in your camp, at least you've got somebody that's it's unreal as well. And that he can bring it back. It happened at McLaren all those years ago, where they had, things that just didn't work out. By the end of the season, things were back on track. The car was on song and doing well. So, yes, they can certainly get it under control, as we've seen in the past. But right now, I mean, I was actually quite shocked at just how that, especially Verstappen, was battling with that car on the Saturday. So I think a lot of head scratching going on there, a lot of work going on there to try and get things sorted out. And I think also it didn't meet expectation. I think, yes, we all knew that Hamilton was going to be where he was. Mercedes were going to be super quick, but I think there was a genuine sort of genuine hope that Max and Honda and Red Bull were going to actually challenge for this World Championship. I think we were excited about it until we started seeing testing. But it's not an unrealistic expectation either. I mean, you've got Honda, you've got Adrian Newey, you've got Red Bull, you've got Max Verstappen. That's championship winning material out there. They've just got to get the mix together and get that all sorted out.
Yeah, hopefully they've done some mathematics. And, Hungary was one of those circuits that you expected them maybe to be a little bit closer. Didn't work out. This is a high power track. And I'm just concerned a little bit about the reliability of the Honda engine this coming weekend. They're going to have to really, really turn that thing up in order to try and even get close to Mercedes. Now, Gary, some great news. Lando Norris, the youngster's had a great start to his season, although the last race wasn't too fantastic, but a great start to the 2020 season. He's going to be sporting a brand new helmet this weekend. Have a look at that. Designed by a 6-year-old girl who sent it through to Lando, and he decided, you know what, I'm going to have that as my helmet this week. And I just think that's so terrific. I mean, we've got these young drivers coming in, they're making names for themselves, and it's just getting, this younger audience again, just getting excited about it. And she's going to be a fan for life now.
No, absolutely. And just kudos for Lando on picking up that. And running the, it's huge. That's a massive thing for somebody. And just to see these guys engaging, with the fans, the way that with how they are, it's great. And that's why you got to have characters. And I think Lando is a great character for Formula One, and just in building his fan base now. So look, the guys, and this is what I was saying just now about accessing more of Formula One, making it connecting more with the people. And I think the new bosses of Formula One have gone a long way into making that all start to happen. But I think a lot more can be done. And things like this, obviously Lando taking it on his own bat to do it is absolutely fantastic. And let's hope it works for him this weekend. And I'd like to be that little girl's parents, seeing her and sitting with her, watching her helmet out there at the British Grand Prix. It must be something quite special for her as well. So kudos to Lando.
Yeah, I think it's going to be something incredible. This weekend, of course, it is the Silverstone Grand Prix. It's all of the cars, of course, use the Pirelli tires. Let's have a look at what they're going to be using this weekend. There we have, you can see it on the graphic, also the circuit of Silverstone, one of the longest, the third longest circuit on the calendar. They've got the hard C1, the C2 medium, and of course the C3 soft tire. So that's going to look pretty good. Gary, any idea if anybody has got pole position other than Mercedes since 2013?
At the British Grand Prix, I actually don't have an idea. I don't think so, to be totally honest with you.
All right, let's have a look at what we got. No, you're 100% right. Since 2013, Lewis, Nico, Lewis, and Valtteri last year. So if you're a betting person, don't bet against the Mercedes Benz team as well. We've looked at the circuit. Gary, the psychology and this, people love to play a little bit of mind games. And Lewis Hamilton has been all over the press for various reasons over the last couple of weeks. He's now come out today and said that he's actually ex-DNA in the Christina Aguilera song. So some fantastic news as well for him. So, he's really out there in the public sphere. But Valtteri Bottas decided to just have a little bit of a go at Lewis, where he's having his barbecue, his braai. And, there's Lewis being a vegan. So Valtteri playing a couple of mind games against Lewis, saying, look how it goes. I suppose you've got to try and do anything you can. I've set the apple cart.
Exactly. Do whatever you can, but whether it works on Lewis or not is another question altogether. He's pretty in control of what's happening there. I think Valtteri's going to have to work very hard to try and beat Hamilton in that department. Nico got it right for 1 year in his life and left it at that.
Yeah, he did.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
That's for sure. Final look at the weather that's going to be happening at Silverstone just for this weekend. Of course, we'll have another show next weekend. Looks like it's going to be sunny. They're expecting rain on Monday. And I must be honest, people were saying to me, please let it rain, please let it rain. I'm like, listen, the Mercedes is better than anybody in the dry and even better than everybody else in the wet as well. So, it's going to be very tough to beat Mercedes this weekend. But, Gary, it is Formula One, and strange things do happen.
Listen, of course, we've been into many Grand Prix thinking, well, this is it. Lewis and Mercedes-Benz are going to walk away. It's another point. And it's turned out to be something completely different. So we just got to wait for the race on Sunday to see what happens. But, of course, it's going to be another interesting weekend. Look, the British Grand Prix is also one of those Grand Prix. It's a fantastic Grand Prix. Just unfortunate that we're not going to have all the fans and the normal sort of thing going on there. But, nonetheless, always good to be at Silverstone. And yes, I just want to go back to your point about the rain. Yes, there's a lot of times when drivers can make a difference in the rain, but at the end of the day, when you've got a driver like Hamilton, a car like Mercedes-Benz, you actually don't want the rain because it's going to make the gap even bigger because he's just going to come to the fore even more. And we saw that in qualifying the other day as well.
That's right. We did. Gary, always a pleasure, my friend. We'll do it again next week. Can't wait. I'm sure we'll chat at length over the course of the weekend during pre-practice qualifying and, of course, the race in Silverstone this weekend. Keep us updated with what's happening on GTC, please, and we'll post it all up here as well.
I think, Sasha, just to mention quickly before we touch up, I think DTM starts this weekend. Spa this weekend. We've got Calvin Fun and Jonathan Aberdeen in the Works BMWs in the DTM Championship this weekend, so look out for that. And of course, I want to make mention of Brad Binder over the last couple of weekends in MotoGP. I tell you what, it was great as a South African to see him out there, and the performance that he put on was, I think, outstanding. So just great to see all the South Africans out there in top-line motorsport and it all happening. So look out for it this weekend. Our DTM boys are in with a chance of actually winning that race and fighting for the championship.
Yeah, and Calvin van der Linde won last weekend. So
Correct. That's great.
it's fantastic. You know what I mean? Keep the flag flying, and I mean there's a lot happening on the local scene as well as the international scene. There we go. Huge thank to Fritz, of course, who's our director, and Henk, who is our executive producer of the F1 PitBox. Gary, we'll chat, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll be back again very soon. And listen, thanks for your company. Thanks. If you posted comments, we'll go through them during the course of the next couple of hours and answer any questions that you have as well. If you've got any comments, please post them on the Facebook page or the YouTube page as well. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Take care. Ciao, ciao.